While the romantic tale of Bobby and Cherry is surely great, it isn't your run-of-the-mill heartfelt fantasy. These two have been hitched for quite some time as of now. While outwardly everything looked perfect, in the background Bobby was leaving well enough alone from his significant other. In any case, this mystery was eventually uncovered and changed everything Cheryl once knew. It was January 2015 when Cheryl started her typical wake-up routine. Her better half was snoozing when there was a thump on the entryway. She opened the front way to see specialists remaining before her. She accepted they were there to investigate her insane neighbor. Cherry didn't stress briefly in light of the fact that she expected it was a mix-up. In any case, before she really might ask what they wanted, 12 officials pushed past her. Life evolving. At first I wasn't stressed, however the second I opened the entryway, 12 officials came bursting past me, Cheryl said. At that point, she had no clue about that this would be the second that her reality would be turned potential gain down. Asking for his name. A portion of the officials who strolled past Cheryl had been wearing coats with the recognizable FBI letters across the back. Since she didn't have the foggiest idea what was happening, she followed them inside her home. She was totally confused. Absolute bedlam. Stirred up, Cheryl reviewed, they went straight back to the room, and approached Bobby. She heard one of the officials pose her significant other one inquiry. "What's your name?" He answered decisively, "Bobby Love," asking for his name. The authorities went ideal for Bobby and posed him a progression of inquiries beginning with, "What's your name?" However at that point they said, "No, what's your genuine name?" Minutes after the fact Bobby was placed into cuffs and removed. Bobby had a past. In shock. Cheryl couldn't comprehend what was happening. She didn't have the foggiest idea how to respond. She argued and asked what was going on. As he pushed him out the entryway in binds, Bobby said, "This goes way back, Cheryl. Back before I met you. Walter Mill operator. Brought up in North Carolina. Walter Mill operator had a really respectable youth during the 1960s. He comes from an unfortunate group of 8, which makes sense of why he began to lose himself. Walter had his most memorable capture as a Sam Cooke show when he hilariously shouted a revile word at the stage. An 80s show. Everything began when Walter went to a Sam Cooke show. He reviewed, the group was truly moving on the grounds that it was dance music. Furthermore, Sam Cooke could have done without that. He continued advising individuals to sit down. Going downhill. Furthermore, after just 2 melodies, he strolled off the stage. Flippantly, Walter hollered a foulness coordinated at the stage. Very quickly, he was captured for scattered direct. Afterward, he talked about the episode. Things went downhill before long after that. Years of insignificant violations. After the show, he was associated with difficult situations. He began taking, and with every wrongdoing began to be more ready to face challenges. These were simply unimportant wrongdoings, adolescent confinement, etc. notwithstanding. Inside the time he began to get more extreme punishments. Trouble was calling. He said, "I lifted handbags from open vehicles, I was taking government settles up with letterboxes, I got increasingly bold." He often perpetrated little wrongdoings to rapidly get some money. This happened for a little while. Juvenile confinement center. That was, until one day he took from his school's band room. He got found out and was shipped off an adolescent detainment place close by. Following quite a while of frivolous wrongdoings, he at long last needed to confront the results. What happened exactly? Imprisoned. "I actually have scars from every one of the times I got beat up," he said, despite the fact that it had been numerous years since he had remained at the middle. That multitude of recollections and encounters would remain with him until the end of time. Also, they won't leave his skin. His life immediately different. Walter went from doing anything he needed to observe the guidelines of the adolescent detainment framework. Years after the fact he grumbled about how horrendous the food and savagery were. The whole time Walter was there he envisioned getting out. Calculating an arrangement. In the evening, Walter would nod off paying attention to every one of the trains cruising by. The sounds made him wish he was a liberated individual and wasn't restricted to the walls of the middle. He realized he needed to get out, however he needed to sort out how. First vanishing. His opportunity showed up when one evening, the gatekeeper monitoring the entryways of the confinement community turned his back to really take a look at the time. This was the very second Walter had been hanging tight for. He immediately dashed to the exit doors. The break. He said, I ran out the secondary passage, toward that whistle. Furthermore, that was the primary spot I at any point got away from, yet it wouldn't be the last. Walter had the option to pull off an immense wrongdoing, a shoddy jail escape. Daring getaway. This was his main opportunity to break free. He had a perfectly measured proportion of time to exit, and that is whether he did. He ran out and never thought back. This undeniable whenever he first got away from somewhere. Making his way to the tracks. Walter ran for the train tracks and did how he needed to help a long while. He proceeded to check where they were going. He went north, to Washington, D.C., where his sibling resided. His life was changing for the better. Washington, D.C. From the outset, it appeared as though things were truly pivoting for Walter. One of his siblings was living in Washington, D.C. at that point, so Walter remained with him in his city loft and selected himself in secondary school. As a matter of fact, he started really going to his classes and playing b-ball with friends. Spoken to soon. Once more yet again Walter turned out to be essential for some unacceptable gathering of children, and his life got ugly. He was unable to remain on the correct way. It was as though he pulled in inconvenience. In any case, this was the beginning of something bigger. Much more regrettable wrongdoings. While his companions were not associated with negligible robbery, they were engaged with additional perilous occurrences. He and his companions began burglarizing banks and turned out to find lasting success since there was loosened up security. Walter reviews that after every looter they would hang out at the strip at 14th and T streets and behave like large clocks. We felt like hoodlums. Walter was on a high youth pack. At first, Walter and his companions fended on getting off with bank ransacking. He reviewed, after each score, we'd pass out on the strip at 14th and T streets and behave like huge clocks. We felt like criminals. In a snapshot of genuineness, Walter conceded, "I have no one to fault except for myself. I just partook in the sensation of having money. Getting gotten once more." Tragically, his fortunate streak before long came to a need. August 1971 denoted the day that everything came crashing down. He ransacked to keep money with a quiet caution. When he left the bank, the specialists were all hanging tight for him. He did all that to escape, however at that point he was shot. It was finished. Or on the other hand you might think, back in binds. At the point when Walter left the bank, the police were at that point in the parking garage, sitting tight for him. "I attempted to move away, dodging and winding around, going through vehicles," he said. Notwithstanding, an official didn't allow him the opportunity. Once more, he was gotten. What might he at any point do next? Sentenced for his violations. Walter was gotten and condemned for 25 to 30 years for bank burglary. All the while, he additionally was informed that his mom died. With this news, Walter concluded he expected to transform him. Walter mentioned to be moved to a jail with least security. This is the point at which his arrangement began to form. Maximum security. There had been a couple of requests accomplished for Walter, yet they generally fizzled. While he had become accustomed to jail by that point, he concluded that the main way his life would be even somewhat improved was assuming he'd be moved from a most extreme security community to a base security one down the slope. Thus, he thought of a plan. His work paid off. Walter was committed to work on his life and change things around. He had a perfect record in jail and expected to be moved to least security. At the point when he at long last was, this felt like camp. He had more opportunity. To start with, get away from wasn't at the forefront of his thoughts, however that rapidly changed. The move. His new circumstance was much more straightforward. As a matter of fact, he said it was more like a camp, contrasted with the last jail he was in. While this office likewise had high fences and tall firearm towers, it had a bigger feeling of freedom. Things were evolving. Prisoners were permitted to stroll outside and even call their families. Walter was permitted to have his own public broadcast. Right away, he had no designs for getting away. Nonetheless, that before long changed when things got worse. Everything went downhill. Things were looking acceptable for Walter in the penitentiaries. He had a radio personality work and he delighted in it. Sadly, on one occasion one of the detainees hollered at the skipper of the detainee, and Walter was blamed for this. The commander previously detested Walter and was habitually keeping in touch with him up. With only a couple of more, Walter would be sent back to most extreme limit. Walter had zero desire to go backward. Too many negative reports. Since that point, The chief had it out for Walter and he began singling out him. As indicated by Walter, the chief would review him for infractions consistently. These were in many cases unreasonable in Walter's recollection. An eye on him. The negative reports continued to stack up until I was one imprint away from being sent back up the slope, Walter said. Since he would have rather not gotten back to the past jail, he concluded it was the ideal opportunity for him to sort out an escape. A new open door. Subsequent to getting many negative reports, Walter was given quite possibly of the most minimal undertaking in the jail. He was told to clean the streets, which expected him to get up extra early and get rubbish from Raleigh. This interaction was horrendous, particularly since he had food and beverages tossed at him all there. Far and away more terrible, it was winter and the weather conditions was freezing. The plotting starts he reviewed, it was dreadful. Individuals would be thrown